It's the Tory Party conference and the four hopefuls will be giving their 20-minute speeches tomorrow. I have to say, I think they're deluded. They talk about things like our voters, as if they have some sort of divine right to govern the centre-right. They also seem to be completely obsessed with me and with getting back the reform vote. Let's have a look at Generic and Cleverly today in action.
My view of reform is this. I think it's a symptom, not a cause. It exists in its current state because we failed. And by that I don't mean you, the members of the party. I mean we in Westminster. We made promises, we didn't keep them. So I'm not going to disparage reform. I think in a way that's denigrating the millions of people who vote for them, who are our people. What I am going to do is set out, with your support, to make them redundant, to retire Nigel Farage.
We need to demonstrate that we are a proper Conservative party because reform is a pale imitation of us. We don't need to be a pale imitation of them. We need to be the best version of us.
Nigel Farage, is he a Tory? Will you allow him in if he stops?
He's not a Tory. He's not a Tory. He's not. He never claims to be a Tory. He said he hates the Tories. He wants to destroy our party. He is not one of us. This is my family. This is my clan. These are the people I serve.
Do you know, they really honestly, truly think, just pick a new leader, only the sixth since 2016, get a few new policies and hey bingo, all be no problem, they'll win the next election. There seems to be no comprehension that their brand is broken. At least that's my view, Claire Purcell. You can't tell people in 2010, 15, 17 and 19 that you're going to do a number of things and not do them.
No, you absolutely can't. And I think the one thing that they're missing when they keep going on about reform or they keep going on about you or any of your other MPs, what is it that makes them Conservative? Because what I want to hear is how the Conservative Party are going to be Conservative, how they're going to lead, how they're going to put policies together, and are they actually going to do stuff that the membership and the country wants? I think that all of this obsession with getting you to retire, congratulations.
There's no chance of that, I can assure you.
What is that obsession about? Because all they're doing is going, well, look over there, there's your problem, without looking inside and saying, do you know what, the problem is us.
That's a very fair point. Now, whilst they obsess, Joe, about votes lost to reform, there's also much talk about votes lost to the Liberal Democrats. And what was interesting...
They don't want to retire Ed Davey. They don't even mention him.
He doesn't sort of... I don't think Ed Davey courts quite the level of controversy I do, but I can't think why. But what was interesting was they may have only lost 7% of their vote to the Lib Dems, but it was lost in a very targeted way geographically.
Yeah.
You know, so Theresa May... Tom Tugendhat saying, look, you know, I'm the candidate that Lib Dems like the most. Do you think the Lib Dems should fear the Conservatives getting those votes back?
I think the Conservatives are so far away from getting the votes back from our people, whoever the hell they are.
I know.
I mean, it is so
arrogant.
It's so arrogant. And there doesn't seem to be any, as Claire says, any self-awareness of... Actually, you completely screwed up over 14 years. And whether or not you think, you know, Keir Starmer and the new government are doing very well, which I happen not to at the moment, actually what they have inherited and what we are all paying the price for, whether it's housing, transport, money wasted and everything else, is because of these people. The other thing I find astonishing about this conference is you don't really get to hear them very much apart from Robert Generic banging on about the European Convention on Human Rights and this absolute nonsense about our armed forces, special forces, which he then couldn't answer the question about, and Kemi Badenoch, you know, attacking maternity pay. But where are the big speeches from the conference floor? Is this it? Because that's what it looks like.
Well, I'm guessing we're going to get that tomorrow, aren't we?
Yeah, I think...
Who is it?
Well, it'll be the four of them.
It'll be all four of them.
But I mean, you know, the big speech, you know, because Sunak came...
Oh, well, there isn't going to be one as such. No, there isn't going to be one.
There
but
nothing.
There was a byline in the Telegraph today, you know, big beasts fight it out, but they're not really that big of beasts, are they?
Well, they're not, and we've kind of seen all of them before as well. So none of this is new because, you know, whichever round of the beauty contest that we've been through, most of those have been present through it. So we've heard from them, we know what they're going to be, you know, pretty much what they're going to be saying. So I think that this is just the last sort of, you know, spit and polish moment to go to the membership. But the problem with conferences is that you're speaking to rooms of people that generally agree with you. If you're going to pay that money to go to a conference, you're not going to go there and say, actually, you're wrong, you should be doing this.
And many will be councillors and have positions of some kind.
Absolutely. And what's quite interesting is that Tom Tugendhat has now polled better with younger Conservatives, which is a demographic that we've struggled with for decades, let's be honest. Our membership tends to be a lot older, so if you're looking to attract new people into the party, some of those younger people do need to come up through the ranks, and you want to make them feel welcome, and he seems to be doing that. But I think tomorrow's speeches, largely, most people won't tune in. I think most people will forget. We'll get a few headlines out of them. But when you're in opposition, you are largely going to be irrelevant.
Well, isn't this what happened to William Hague in 97? And Hague, actually, I mean, to be fair to him, very witty, well-educated, erudite.
A fabulous...
But kind of couldn't really make the news.
But in the same way as, Min Campbell was a disastrous leader for the Liberal Democrats, and hugely respected, a great parliamentarian, fantastic on defence and foreign affairs, but a disaster as a leader. And actually what the Tories don't seem to recognise is that they need to be talking beyond their membership.
That's Claire's point.
And that's Claire's point, exactly.
It's a room full of people that support you anyway.
It's ridiculous.
Well, I have to say, folks, I believe the brand, I think that's their problem. The brand is broken. Too many broken promises from just too many manifestos. I think they're going to find it really, really hard. I'm going to keep returning to this story. In the week that Harland and Wolff, of course, the company that made the Titanic, have announced they're going into administration. The week in which the last coal-fired power station in Britain has been closed down. The week in which 2,000 people are losing their jobs down at Port Talbot as we effectively cease to be a producer of primary steel, but very happy for Tata to move the production to India. And we've seen it. We've seen it with aluminium refineries. We've seen it with chemical plants. The country is going through an industrial massacre, and it's all completely self-inflicted because of government policies aimed at net zero, which have given us the most expensive electricity in the world. We are paying consumers and businesses 74% more for our electricity than the Americans, 32% more for our electricity than the French, and yet there's more to come, as a senior EDF boss warns that Ed Miliband's rapid move away from fossil fuels to renewables leaves us at risk of shortfalls. He also says it'll make us more reliant on importing power from Europe and will impact upwardly on bills. Joe Phillips, just what do we think we're doing to ourselves?
Well, EDF keep coming out with these things, and they did it actually a few months ago.
They did.
Also,
doesn't mean they're wrong.
No, it doesn't mean they're wrong, but they are pushing their own agenda. I think one always has to look at where a story comes from and where it is placed. And this was actually, funny enough, at the Conservative conference. It was an event that EDF were sponsoring. And what they're saying is that they can't meet the aims by 2030 because we won't have enough alternative. I mean, there are several things here. One is, I suppose, on a sort of, for the people of Port Talbot, it's an absolute disaster. It's ghastly. 2,000 people are losing their jobs. Some of them may get other jobs in new industry. But you can't put it all on Ed Miliband and net zero. What you can do, Nigel, is to look that over the last 20, 25 years, we have increasingly deindustrialised, and we haven't replaced it because we haven't been training people.
But we've deindustrialised because of the net zero policies we're pursuing.
I don't agree with that.
Why is our electricity so much more expensive than anywhere else in the world?
Well, mainly because of the energy companies making an absolute fortune.
No, because we've got more renewables than anybody else. We've cut carbon emissions more than anybody else.
Which is great, and we should be pleased with that.
As long as we're prepared to close down industry and have our old people and poor people paying big bills.
Well, the industry being closed down is separate to this.
No, it isn't.
Some of it is part of it, but look at what's happening to car manufacturing in Germany.
The biggest single price, even above wages, for all heavy industry is energy. And Claire, I suppose, in a sense, I can't really blame Ed Miliband because it was your lot that started all this, wasn't it?
But it was, and Boris Johnson and his obsession with getting to net zero, I mean, it was always a bonkers strategy to start with. I don't think that anybody would suggest that you didn't need to look at alternatives, but you don't need to rush for some arbitrary date when the country isn't ready to do it, and you can't do it at the expense of businesses and industry and just general consumers, because we've all seen how expensive it is to heat our homes. We've all seen the effects of harsh winters. And what's going to happen? The grid isn't going to be able to cope. And we're going to have blackouts. That's my prediction. This is how bad this is going to get, because this obsession with cutting it down by
and we've given it all. We've set up the National Energy System Operator, another quango.
Another one.
Which is going to run the whole thing absolutely beautifully. A final thought on this, we have to think about winter fuel payments in the context of all of this.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've never really been for universal benefits, but it kind of seems to me that given just the sheer cost of our energy prices is perhaps a very good reason not to get rid of it.
I think the policy of getting rid of giving it to people who can well afford not to have it is fine.
But we could do that through a tax system, couldn't we?
You could do it through a tax system. I think the way the Labour Party have handled it has been absolutely ridiculous. It's entirely of their own making. But in principle, I don't have a problem with wealthy people not getting an automatic benefit. It is quite ridiculous.
Nor do I. Actually, Claire,
and it could be
if we raise the level, and it would cost money, but if we raise the level across the board at which people start to pay tax, and we could say anybody that has to pay tax on a pension doesn't get the fuel allowance. Surely there's a better way of doing this.
I think wrapping it up in the state pension, so start to reform what's going on with the state pension and put it onto that, because the minute you do, even those people that you think are wealthy would then get taxed on it, so that would bring in money. Because at the moment, this policy isn't going to bring in anywhere near what Labour thought it was going to, because of the amount of people that are now going to claim pension credit that didn't do so previously. So it's a bit of a null and void point, and they've just handled it so incredibly badly. I mean, freezing granny at Christmas is never going to be a good look, and if the Tories had done it, they would have been screaming from the rooftops.
Yeah. Well, I think there's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about it. Final quick thought on this segment. Another report out today saying that GDP per capita is falling again. This is something now like 7 consecutive quarters in a row, that the more the population goes up, living standards are falling in this country. Are we finally going to get the message? You did mention skills and training a moment ago.
Yeah.
It's very relevant to this subject, isn't it?
Absolutely. And one of the reasons, as I'm sure you would love to point out, Nigel, is because of the number of people coming to this country. There are thousands, tens of thousands, stuck, waiting to be processed. There are 137,000 cases on appeal that haven't been processed. Part of the problem is the backlog that built up under the previous government. Then Rishi Sunak called an election. Before he called the election, he made it illegal for anybody or anyone who had arrived illegally couldn't claim asylum, which put the whole system into total stasis.
I mean, that's part of it, but also we've got legal migration massively exploding the population.
Yes, you've got that as well. But, you know, some of these people could possibly be working. Some of them might be trained engineers, carpenters, electricians, IT specialists, nurses.
I suspect very few that cross the Channel are.
Nigel, I don't know.
But I mean, it's interesting.
We were talking about Lebanon a little while ago, you know, for obvious sad reasons.
There will be some.
I remember when I was out there being driven around by a taxi driver who was driving a taxi, but he was an engineer.
But if we allow people to come illegally to work, goodness knows how many more will come. Claire, you know, the one argument that kept being made to me during the Conservative years was that we have to have mass migration because it's good for the economy. And we can now clearly see, as I say, going over the course of the last couple of years, that the bigger the population, and that's driven almost entirely through migration into Britain, the poorer we're becoming.
Yeah, and I think you have to have that conversation about migration, and you have to have it in a really sensible manner, because there will have to be a cut-off point. But also it goes back to the conversation that we've just had about what industry we also have left in this country, because if you aren't producing anything, if you aren't getting people out to work in those kind of places anyway, then how are you going to feed your own population, let alone anybody else coming in? So I think you need to look at it from both sides. Yes, you need to look at migration, and you have to have a serious conversation about who is coming in and why they're coming in, and not just letting anybody work. I mean, there are so many conversations.
I think it begins to change the whole debate myself.